Well, obviously everyone is know Joe already, so we're just gonna skip the presentation. Yeah, you can find him on his YouTube channel on the Captain Joe Pike and Instagram, and now he got even a Facebook page. So so many ways to contact him. So today, yeah, we're gonna talk about how to hunt for lobster. And obviously, when I thought about the lobster, I know who to ask that again. It's quite kind of specialized into lobster.
I spent too long looking for lobsters. You can't spend too long.
Tell us about your lobster hunting.
Well, I really like it because it's proactive, you know. I think sometimes with spearfishing, there's a lot of waiting around, which is all good. But yeah, I love to be proactive and actually search, and you know, getting to know the reef really, really well is it's like a safari, you know. You can see so many different things, conger eels, anemones, you know. Then you start finding the scallops and all the mollusks, and yeah, it's pretty good fun. It's a nice change sometimes from just the routine of spearfishing, you know.
Yeah.
And
what the grounds?
well, yeah, it's I think there is a formula for finding them, and the ground is a really big part of the equation. So lobsters need shelter, you know. They need burrows, crevices, cracks. So you need to be looking in rocky areas, of course. But bearing in mind, well, I find they're a bit deeper usually in those west-facing stretches. Some, you know, they quite like shelter. So if I'm the east-facing stretches like Teignmouth, Torbay, Dart Bay, I mean, they're all packed, you know, with lobster. If you know it, look, I think you need to be a bit more of a specialist on some of the rougher coasts to find them. But yeah, you just gotta, I think, you know, have an absolute PhD in reefs. Just study them, you know. You put the spear gun away and study the reef, and I think that's the first step.
Yeah, I came across lobster more because I'm cruising and all of that than looking really for them, especially for them. So I just spending my time upside down.
I remember that one you picked up, you pulled out about last year around this time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you just saw it out walking, which is really common at this time of year.
Yeah, they're quite out. They also tend to get out a lot at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Most the one I saw crawling around is that just before nighttime, they just pop out. Is a like yeah. I remember one place I was just I saw a lobster, tried to get it, missed it completely, came back a couple of hours later, and the light was starting going down, and it was out. It was just in front of me, and then I managed to pick it up like that. So the night time is really how to say, easy time to target lobster. But
yes.
But I'm not sure about the restriction, because the restriction on spearfishing at night is very unclear. The new regulation who came last year.
I think it's all to do with projectiles. So you can go out and grab stuff and stab stuff, but you can't actually use a projectile. So you can't use a sling and you can't use a gun to actually shoot stuff. Obviously, if you're out and about over dusk and you catch stuff and then get caught coming at night, there's a little bit of an issue. There is a little bit of a grey area there. I was emailing the Devon inshore fisheries guys about this a number of months ago.
Yeah.
They basically said the best thing to do is if you do have a gun with you and you're going to be out at night, is to strap the gun to your float, because then if they're looking out in the water and they see a gun strapped to the float, they can reasonably assume that you haven't actually used it. But at the same time, if you dive down and you're stabbing stuff, then you're not using it. So it's all to do with the projectile element, basically, is what they were saying.
Okay, right. So I find that very borderline. Yeah, it's very borderline. I think you find if you got a fishery officer a bit picky, it might be troubling. But just don't have your spear gun with you if you want to forage at night, basically.
The rules are important. You do need a permit. So in Devon, you go on the Devon and Severn IFCA website, and some of you might have them. I think it's £20 for.
£25 for the year, and you got a limitation of 2 or 3.
Two
per person.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so important. It's that like I was saying the other day about the fisheries and all of that. It's very local. So Devon has his own regulation. Cornwall has his own regulation. Just the example for the scallops. In Cornwall, there is no limitation of number. You can bring as much as you want, but in Devon we are limited to 25, and you need a permit. So please check with the local regulation to make sure you are in your right as well. You know, and the problem is that any Spearo going to be caught. The newspaper are gonna jump on it saying, "Oh yeah, another reckless fisherman," blah blah blah. So if you stick to the rules and try to apply them as much as possible and get in touch with the right authorities, then if an officer's come to you and say such and such and such, and then you say, "But that's the email from your authority," and then so I'm in my rights. You can argue. Otherwise, there is no point arguing with an authority guy. So, Joe, if you want to carry on. So, where is your just the last thing about regulation? So, can you show us the size, or you size a lobster to be legal?
Yes. So here it is. You need to measure from the back of the eye socket to here, which is basically the end of the carapace. So just be aware, it's not from the kind of spike here. It's from the eye socket. So this one is 12 centimeters, minimum size, 819 mil. And always check the tail. Check there's no berries, of course.
Yeah, so underneath the tail, you need to check. They need to be released all with eggs. So if they carry eggs, soft shell, they need to be released. And sometimes you can find some in the tail. They're gonna have a notch.
Yeah.
And this one doesn't. But if they have a notch, they've been for scientist reason. They're doing studies and all of that, so they need to be released. So.
Yeah, or it's a good breed or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a reason, so they need to be released. That's the kind of specimen you need to release.
Yeah, I think also there's an interesting thing on our permit which says you're not allowed to keep any lobsters if you actually rip their claws off. You break their claws. If they're in any way damaged, you can't land them, which is quite unusual. You have to release them. I did check that. It does say that. So, you are legally not allowed to do that. So, I'm not sure what sense it makes, really.
So, sorry, say that again, Joe. So if they are missing a claw, you're not allowed to take them?
Yeah, the wording's a bit unclear. I think what it's saying is if you are diving for lobster and you pull, it loses a claw, you then have to leave it. You can't land it.
It's my understanding that it's kind of the other way around, that you can't land the claws without the carapace, but you can land the carapace without the claws.
Ah, okay.
That make more sense.
I'll dig up my permit on the other computer and on my phone, and I'll see at some point. But that sounds good. Sounds good. But I must admit, I don't tend to be in that situation really. I tend to just leave lobsters if I think I'm going to damage them. Sometimes they do have some very good caves. Sometimes occasionally I think it's best to move on and just let them be. Sometimes, yeah. the other thing is quite interesting is some lobsters. I was chatting with a friend about this the other day. If you don't know if anyone's been in the situation where a lobster has left a hole when you've been trying to get it, but if a lobster thinks its hole is kind of compromised, it thinks it's at risk, it will tend to evacuate, which is quite interesting. I think that when Max asked earlier about sort of top tips, it's hesitation is can cost you lobster, and I think it's also worth talking about grabbing them. I think don't be scared of grabbing the lobster just back of the tail, and go really firmly, and don't hesitate, because if you kind of fumble about it, it will be gone. It'll be off.
When I've gone to grab them before, I've always found it actually harder to grab. And this isn't me giving advice. This is just my experience.
Yeah.
When I've grabbed them by the tail, if they've been of any big size, they've been so powerful when they start flapping that tail. And as you know, the shell on the inside of the tail there is razor sharp, and if it closes down on your finger, if you grab it underneath too much, that can cause you to have all sorts of problems. So if I do it, I always aim for the bit where you were showing us with the measurement.
The carapace, that is, to be fair, that is what I meant. The carapace, so when I said tail, this bit, to be specific, totally agree. And
I've got a nice big scar on my finger from that. They're just right there.
Really, that's a cool scar. I've had a few moments.
Don't forget, chicks dig scars, Matt. So
And Joe, so you're doing, is that very shallow, or do you find them deep? Most you're hunting for lobster. I know you can, it's like a lot of things you can find. You're gonna for once find something like on the space you didn't expect them, but mostly what's your average depth?
Well, lobsters don't actually mind a breath of fresh air. So if it's calm, if it's I guess sheltered is the word I'm looking for, like the right kind of bay, they can be considerably above the low tide mark. So that one I pulled out yesterday, down at the marina, the one I just showed you, the tide was a 30 centimetre tide, and that was about 3 meters up the shore from there in its hole. So, I think the thing is with lobsters is they are really competitive for burrows and kind of lairs and stuff. So, they will, if there's a perfect little hole for them and it is above the low tide mark, they'll definitely take it. So sometimes you're diving. I've had, big lobsters that are almost too shallow to dive, where they've been in about that much water, and I've been forcing myself under the crack with my fins flapping about in the air trying to get them. So you don't need to dive deep, definitely not.
Most of my lobster, I find that the cave they are in are roughly always the same. They need like a soft sandy bottom or something like that. Do you find something special about the cave they are in?
Yeah, for sure. They love a soft, bottom to their burrow for sure. Whether that's mud or silt or sand, totally agree. They love that kind of dusty mud, don't they? That's kind of dusty.
Yeah.
It was like a little sort of, I don't know, mattress for them. But they don't tend to like to be on hard rock. No, definitely not.
Do you think it's part of their instinct to defend themselves with the soft sand as well? Because when they move around, they can make themselves hard to spot when they kick all of the sediment up underneath them.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. They love to sort of burrow in it a bit as well. And I don't know. There's I guess there's three types of kind of. I always think there's 3 types of lobster burrow. There's a kind of, imagine like a slab of rock on the ground and on the sand, and they will burrow right under those. I mean, sometimes I've seen just this tiny little burrow and I've dug out the sand, and there's an absolute cracking lobster under a big, like big just stone, basically. They're often like those flat boulders that are just there, and you see them and you think, oh, that's worth just having a really close look around the outside.
How much of their body can they get in the sand, Joe? Because I've never dug one out of the sand like that before.
Well, I don't know. I made this video about this time last year, and it's a bit ridiculous. I can't remember what it's called, but there was this one where in the video you might have seen there's just a rock on this sandy floor, and I just saw this hole. I kid you not, it was about, I don't know, an inch. And I just saw this one tiny little antennae poking out, and that's what gave it away. I never knew they were that much, that crafty until then. So I think, to find them, you really do need to just get your face so close up, on the reef and study it, like I was saying earlier, definitely. But yeah.
Do you find them in some other like structure? Like I know often wrecks hold them.
Yeah, for sure.
But do you find them in some kind of other structure in the shallow?
I found them in car tires. I found them under like corrugated iron sheets in Tall Bay. So can't give away spots exactly, but around Berry Head area. I dived there with Corey last year, and there was this corrugated iron sheet, just rubbish, that had been thrown off, and there were 3 lobsters underneath that. It was just flat on the ground, kind of propped up by a few rocks, and we would, because it was so long, they could scuttle underneath right into the middle, and you couldn't lift this thing up. So we had some fun, but any cover, anything, rubbish, wreckage, they love, absolutely love it. Oh, Rowan's just seen Rowan join. He's probably been doing this for longer than me. So, and Chris,
yeah.
The pros have joined. So I mean, please ask these guys as well, because they know their stuff. They've probably been doing it a lot longer than me. To be fair, so Chris might agree with that about the kind of any kind of shelter and cover, like just saying. Found
get them anywhere.
Yeah.
So I used to be on the hoe, and right by the sea, and there's loads of crap in the water, like traffic cones and tyres all over the seafront there, and always finding crabs and lobsters in there. One of the biggest ones we got, Chris was actually with me at the time. We found like a little like a 10-foot dinghy that was upturned on the bottom on like really fine sediment, and it took all 3 of us to go and lift it up. And this enormous thing trundled out from under it, and Chris managed to grab him before the silk cloud covered it up.
Yeah. I used to read some of Chris's stories, like I would be bedtime reading that there, your lobster catching, back in the day. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, we've always had our very biggest ones, like 3 kilos plus, about this time of year, like the very end of February through to like April. Yeah, I don't know why that is. But my theory is the bigger ones find the holes you'll never get them in shortly after they've come in. So you want to get them as soon as they come in from deep after the winter storms.
Yeah. A lot of them molt well, don't they? Have just molted, so they're hungry too. I think they're out marching about and eating anything they can find. Yeah.
I find I got the mark where basically there's a piece of wreckage there, and every year I go and visit it, but at that time of the year, I find it's only female in it. Like I did 5 dives and I got 5 lobster, and it was all female with eggs. Wow. So you need to release them, but it's packed. It's like packed with it. I couldn't believe, because that stuff is in the middle of nowhere. It's a flat, muddy, silty bottom, but there is just this little piece of structure on it, and it's packed with lobster inside. It's just like crazy.
I think my favourite technique for trying to find them is if I'm on like a rocky kelp reef where there's no sediment, where there's like a rise. So if you swim along over the top and you see that one part is slightly higher, slightly elevated, you dive down on the lower side, and that's usually where a ledge is. and then just swim along the ledge, looking at the holes along the bottom. That's how I find most of my lobsters.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find they tend to be, if you can find a ledge that is on the landward side of a boulder, it's much better as well?
I completely agree. Yeah, the sheltered side is that's where they all seem to hang out.
Because any waves that are coming in are kind of broken by that boulder, and they're on the other side. And
yeah, that's definitely.
They are on the protected side of the swell.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Do you, Joe or Chris or Ryan, do you use anything like a cray loop, or do you use your spear to hook them out or something like that?
No, just a flopper on the spear. If I can get turn around and reach in and grab them, I'll grab them. If they need using out, use the flopper to tickle their tail.
Well, when I'm going for them, I put the spear gun away just because I find it a bit cumbersome, and usually just use my hands. But I did take an electric fence pole off my brother's farm a couple of years ago and just bend the end round, and that's, I mean, you don't need to do it, but I just find it makes things a bit more efficient for me. It's quite long, for some of those lobsters that are just way back, if you can just really slowly maneuver on the back of the tail, just plain sailing really. As long as you get something behind them, they just hate it, don't they? I think Chris wrote about that once in one of his posts. It was like,
get around at that point, do they, and just sort of turn around and back out of the hole, or do they just run out forward?
If you can tickle the tail, they'll turn around if they can and back away from the thing that's tickling them, so you're the flopper or the end of the hook, and then you can reach in and grab them because the claws are facing away from you.
Yeah, they hate something behind them. Absolutely hate it.
Okay.
Some of the biggest lobsters I've had, if the hole is way too deep for you to get to the back of it, and the bigger lobsters like the best holes. Before you even start annoying them, if you don't think you're going to be able to get them once they do go back, if you take the spear out of your gun and just get the flopper in front of them, don't go right up to them, but just start twitching it in front of their face so they get annoyed. Then they'll start going for it, like they're trying to attack it like it's a fish. And then if they come out far enough going for your flopper, keep pulling it back, and then you can reach down from above and grab them. So before you spook them, try and annoy them to come out rather than scare them. And if that fails, you can always go back to the normal way. But I've had some really big ones doing that from holes that I didn't think I could get in the back of.
I go really, really carefully. I'm really slow. Yeah, really gentle. I don't know about Chris or Rowan, but I tend to put the hook back in behind them in slow motion. I think you've got to bear in mind they've got the antennae and then these sets of antennules, and they can sense movement, and they can sense all these different chemicals, and they can also tell the difference between light and dark. As far as I'm aware, they can tell shades. So the quicker you move and the more chemicals release, the more change in light you make, the more agitated they'll get. So I would say the golden rule is to go as slow as you can with all these things, but fully appreciate if Chris or Rowan have another strategy.
I think for the first initial going to get your lobster, be as slow, smooth, as calm as you can. Just approach it from, if you got the hole, approach from an oblique angle, so you're not head on to it. If it's a big hole, they'll back into it and you'll never get them out. Other than that, if they won't come out through gentle cajoling them out, then you've really got to make it as unpleasant as possible for them in there. And after that, they'll just flee the hole. Once the sediment's stirred up, they'll just want to get out of there about 50% of the time. And then you'll see a big cloud of dirt, and then you look down, and then coming underneath you will be a lobster just walking away rather quickly. That's worked a few times. I mean, you don't have to be stabbing a thing in the face with your spear, but just create a bit of disturbance in the hole, and they just don't like it, and they'll just flee the hole. As long as it's not deep.
There's one more technique as well. If you've already got a fish in your belt, again, this is before you've annoyed them. If you gut them and get the guts of your fish and stick it near the entrance to the hole, sometimes the lobster will just trundle out and try and get the food. So yeah, that's before you start sticking your spear in the hole. Get the guts a little way out away from the entrance, enough that if you did go for it, you can just reach down and grab them from on top, and then keep your body out of his view. And yeah, that can work. But yeah, you need a fish to work on that. But that does work.
Yeah,
also, I don't know if it's been said already, but a lobster will choose its hole for security, so they'll have a big front entrance, and they might have a small back entrance as well. So what you might find is you'll approach a lobster hole, which looks fairly decent. There'll be a good lobster in it. You'll try and tease it out. It'll back into the hole, and that's the last you'll ever see of it. It's worth sometimes, if you find a big hole and a big lobster in it, just go about 6 foot behind the hole, over a rock or over on the ledge, and just to check that there isn't a small escape hole behind it. That's all I can say. They'll back out of it, and if you annoy them too much, they'll just flee out the escape hole 6-7 foot away from you, and after that you'd just be looking into an empty hole and they'll be gone.
Yeah, it might just be on the rock near us, but where it's kind of slate, shillity kind of rock, you do find that quite a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's in fault lines, so that fault line will carry on back in a straight line away from where the entrance is, and there might be another one behind it. We get quite a lot of that in the rock around here.
Sorry, Ron. Which area? Not the spot, but which area are you? Sorry, I didn't get it.
West of Plymouth.
Oh, okay, yeah.
A lot of that rock, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite story, Joe, to tell us about the large big lobster? Do you have I remember you coming up with your hands bleeding. Can you tell us more about that technique of yours?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm quite determined if I do find a lobster. I think most people are, but I haven't always been the most skillful. I've still got a lot to improve, and sometimes my lobster extraction is it's bad. But me and Corey discovered this one in Torbay. I mean, I don't know what it is, but I think in Torbay the fishermen just lose so much gear off those kind of little floating pontoons. Off the sides of them are just like 50 lobster pots that have just fallen off, discarded, and they don't care about them. So we used to dive around those, and although the lobster pots are completely abandoned, the lobsters would still go in there because they've got bait, and they can smell the bait and stuff. And I remember there was this one, and it was in this the lobster pot was sunk right down in the mud, so you couldn't open it. And it was just a case of, I mean, I wouldn't say this is worth it, it's risky, and we all got stories, we've done silly things, but I made the decision foolishly to try and get the lobster out of the pot, and it was about a 4-pound lobster, and it did grab my finger proper, it grabbed it I had the glove on, and it just wouldn't let go, actually, to the point where I pulled the lobster out just by gently pulling it out on my finger, and it pulled all the skin off all the way down my finger. It was completely raw. It was weeping for about a month. And Corey's never let me forget me just coming out with this lobster. And then as soon as it was out of the pot, swam off, as fast as it could. And I did get it, but it was it was a bit of a reminder that if they do get your finger, they're not going to break it and rip it off like people say.
Chris, your lobster chin story.
Hey,
tell your lobster chin story.
Which?
Yeah, Rowan and I were night diving. Caught this lobster. It was on the seabed. I went to put it in its bag. A torch was on the lanyard, so it was hanging down. And I don't know how it happened, but I moved the lobster to put it in my bag, and its claw got caught on my chin. So I had this, I can't remember how much it was. It wasn't big, it was like maybe 2 pounds or something. But it had its big claw on my chin, like that. Rowan swam over to me. I was like, Rowan, just get this thing off my face. So there we are, middle of the bay. He's holding onto this lobster, trying to pull it. It's still attached to my chin. I'm trying to find its other claw, which is right here somewhere. It did finally let go, but I had a big dent up and down there in my chin. And that was quite funny.
Well, yeah, I can't claim to have experienced that yet.
Yeah, it was quite good.
Joe, is the lobster that you caught? You know the video where you caught? How big was that lobster? That huge lobster on the YouTube video, and did you donate it to Plymouth Aquarium?
Yeah.
Is it still there? Do you know?
Yeah, well, I spoke to them last June, and they said yeah, they said it had actually got a lot bigger, and they said they kind of wish they hadn't come to pick it up off me because apparently it eats so much. Apparently it just eats. Like everything they give it is gone in 10 minutes.
How old did they think it is?
They said it was about 70 years old, which always makes me feel a bit bad now. But you know,
how heavy was it when you gave it to them?
Well, I didn't have any scales. You know, I didn't have any hanging scales. I put one claw, I remember, on the scales, on some kitchen scales about, you know, a square like that. And I remember trying to sort of prop this claw on it, and it wasn't giving an accurate reading. And the aquarium, they texted me about an hour after they picked it up, and they said, we can't believe it. Your lobster's tipped the scales at 7.6 kilos, which makes it, we think it's the second heaviest crustacean, everything. So then, you know, then a news story came out, you know, a week later, and all the stuff was made up. They'd said, like, they didn't really talk to me about it. Do you know what I mean? Chinese whispers. Like, they said it had been caught in North Devon, and they named it, and I'd named it after some Olympic athlete. Like, it really was a wake up call.
Where you actually caught it.
It was a wake up call for me because it made me realise that what you read in the media it's just junk. You know,
they were bigging it up. It was so big they were going to put a saddle on it and pimp it out as a child's ride to get the money to feed it. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, probably, mate. I don't know. I just came to this article that said it was caught in North Devon. I'd named it after an Olympic athlete, and yeah, a few other things. I knew nothing about.
So Joe, what's the best size eating lobster, and the best way of cooking them?
Well, good question. I like them on the barbecue best. Cut them in half. Start by grilling them with the meat down for about 4 minutes, and then flip it with the shell down. It's my favourite way of doing it, really. And you know, spread some molten butter on it as you go. And size-wise, I think it's more about the condition of the animal. You know, sometimes they just look a bit manky, don't they? And they're covered in barnacles, and they just, I'm not sure about those ones, but you know, when you see them just really pristine and they're that jet black color and they're healthy, and that when you try and get them, they put up a good battle. You know, it's a healthy, happy animal, you know, with a good immune system. I don't think it's just size. You know, everyone will say, oh, big lobsters, you know, they don't taste great. I don't know. I mean, I've caught some of the bigger ones, and I'd say they're fantastic. There could be a point where they get to a certain age, possibly, where they get tough, but I haven't really experienced that, to be honest.
No, I would say the problem with big lobsters is that people cook them for too long because they're so big.
Okay.
That's my opinion of it. If you get like a 1.5, 2.5 pound lobster, 10 minutes in a rolling boil is absolutely fine. But you get like an 8, 9 pound lobster in a big pot, and everyone thinks you've got to boil the thing for like an hour.
Okay, yeah.
I think that's where the myth comes from. I mean, I've cooked up 8 pound lobsters, and they've been absolutely succulent. You just don't cook them for as long as you think. Yeah. That's my take on it, and they'd be succulent as hell. No matter what size lobster it is, if you boil it up, take it off the rolling boil, take it out of the pot, and then just get it cooled as soon as possible. Just dump it in a nice ice bath, or just hose it down with a cold hose pipe, just to get the heat out of its shell and out of the body, and it was to stop it cooking.
Yeah.
Love the way you say hose it down with a cold hose pipe, whereas mine will be a trickling tap, whereas the ones you catch, it is going to need a hose pipe, isn't it?
Well,
taste. It's not on how big or how old they are. I think it's on what stage of the molt they're at. If they're really fresh in the shell, they'll be watery and slimy. And if they're too old in the shell, they go a bit hard and dry. So you want it somewhere in the middle. Like Joe said, if they put up a really good fight, they're somewhere in the middle, and the flesh is going to be really good.
Okay.
So if they've got quite quick reflexes, then yeah, they're going to taste good because they're like somewhere in the middle. They're not about to molt and they haven't just malted, and that's the ideal time you want them.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, there's an interesting debate as well as there to be had about people are very happy to eat smaller lobsters, and I kind of don't really understand the fear, the obsession with eating something younger, because if something's older, it's had a chance to breed. Now there is an argument that the older, bigger lobsters have got the best genes, kind of thing. Well, I'd kind of say the older, bigger lobsters have just not got caught in a lobster pot, and that's probably complete luck of the draw for them. And really, if we are eating bigger lobsters, we're eating lobsters that have bred a few times. I've been attacked many times for taking slightly bigger lobsters because it's bad for the ecosystem. But on the other hand, it's fine apparently to take a lobster that hasn't barely reproduced. I don't really understand that. Maybe someone could identify if I'm misunderstanding anything, or I do appreciate better genes do mean longevity, but actually if a lobster's got to 2 pounds, that's a healthy animal. It's got past the worst struggle in its life.
Other argument as well, most of the lobsters we take are males, right? So if it's a big male and you're taking it, you're not really taking away a total reproductive output, because a female with berries is still going to find another lobster. So still going to be the same amount of offspring, regardless of whether or not you take a big male. So you take a really big male, you're not reducing the total amount of lobster that's going to be bred. It's a really big female, then yeah, you are. But also, are you going to let a massive female go if it doesn't have eggs or a notch? So I'd take a big female if it didn't have notched or berries. But yeah, I wouldn't feel bad at all about taking a big male.
I think the argument is that it's not a linear relationship, so that the reproductive output doesn't just increase in size like that. It increases on a curve like sea bass. See the reproductive output of big bass. One big female bass will probably produce as much offspring as maybe 100 that have just reached reproductive size. So they really are the breeding stock for big animals. And in Canada, they have a maximum size, don't they, instead of a minimum size, to try and allow for that. So that's kind of the argument, I think, for taking bigger animals.
Yeah. That completely explains it, actually. Yeah.
So to come back on that, when I was working in Australia for the abalones, the fisheries were starting talking about putting a maximum size on the abalone as well, as the minimum and the maximum size, and you were allowed to catch only what was in that range, because again, the biggest one meant to be breeding more than a few hundreds of the small ones. So that was the chat.
If what Matthew's saying is scientifically true, and I believe it probably is, because it makes sense, because lobsters, they don't age like humans. So in theory, yeah, their reproductive output could increase as they get older. If that is true, then they really ought to be prioritizing that maximum landing size, you'd have thought, wouldn't you? Which is quite strange, because that's not really helped by, taking lots of smaller lobsters, is it? If you then have no maximum landing size. So
yeah, about this breeding stuff, like I know in the Med we have so the groupers, and groupers, they're changing sex when they are about 4 years old. So having a minimum size guarantee you got people got fish reaching the other sex. So they on the first 4 years, the groupers are male, and they become female after 4 years. So if you shoot all the big ones, you're gonna destroy the whole female, and so you can't reproduce. So the meaning of this minimum size and maximum size could make sense at some point. I really think if there is this kind of, I don't know if a lobster is born and changing sex or not. I have no idea about that, but it could be something to look at.
The other thing I've found with the big lobsters, the 6 pound plus, they are quite territorial. So if you find a big one, you generally not find much around that area where they're based.
Okay.
So that's true, definitely.
Yeah, if you take a big lobster, and me and Rowan have done in the past, quite nice one. You go in that area again a couple of weeks later, and most of the smaller holes are all occupied by very small lobsters. So by knocking out that dominant male, it allows all the smaller lobsters to come in and occupy the holes that they would have been chased away from. That's my theory of it.
Well, I saw that happening last year. There was, I think it was a dead conger eel on the floor, and the lobsters were just lined up in size order, waiting to have a meal from it.
Wow.
And it's in one of my videos. There's a lobster eating this eel. It's about 3.5 kilo lobster, so decent size. And behind it, there was another slightly smaller one, and behind that was another really tiny one, just lined up in this crack. In the video, you can see there's 2 waiting. And after that, I delved into some of the literature, and they were saying they do have this hierarchical system. The scientists think. So yeah, just like Chris says, some of the bigger ones are definitely bullies. Interesting.
Chris and my wife saw that on a big dead crab that was on the bottom once. So Chris went down and got the bigger one, and then there was a littler one just nearby that was waiting for the bigger one to leave the big dead crab alone so that it could have its fill.
Rowan, yeah, you missed out on that one.
Yeah.
Rowan had been looking for, went off on his own for about 2 hours trying to find lobsters and crabs, and we got bored and were just pissing about.
Found 2 chowing down on the big dead crab over the sand.
Like a massive sandy bit. What's he doing? There's nothing down there. There's something dove down with him, and he's picking up this big one, and he's pointing left, get the other one, get the other one. So we came up with a lobster each, and Rowan nothing, absolutely nothing after 2 hours looking. You were not pleased, were you?
I'm going to need Chris and Rowan's help, but personally, I would say that in terms of water conditions, when you have a nice, clear, calm spell, they seem to be much more active. I tend to, especially at this time of year, after winter when it settles down. My theory is that a lot of them, especially on the west-facing coastline, will move into shallower water where they can do more hunting. Because they certainly don't like being smashed about by the swell.
No, not even remotely.
No, they definitely come in shallow, where you can reach them after the last storms hit. So when it starts to calm down in spring, that's when the lobsters all start moving in shallow.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and at this time of year, you can be a bit lazy because they've just molted. They're really hungry, and some of them have released their berries, and the storms are over. And if you just go on a long swim when it's good viz, and you can see the bottom in about 4 or 5 meters of water, you can see some out walking.
It's so much as well that the weeds haven't grown up yet either, so you can find the holes and see where they are, and hopefully remember where they are.
But it makes easier the scouting at that time of the year, because you don't have all the big kelp and covering everything.
It's kind of two ways though, because I did some before lockdown, so January, February. I went for the lobsters quite a bit, and they definitely were deeper. And although you could see them easier because the kelp has really died back, they were well and truly, stuck under these holes, deep in these holes, kind of completely just curled up, just pretty much in hibernation mode.
Yeah, I think the water temperature has got a lot to play with it as well. If it's sort of 6-7 degrees water temperature, they don't move around very much.
Yeah, agreed. Like the bass.
Yeah, but you get sort of mid-summer time and the water's up to what, 13, 12, 13, 14 degrees.
Yeah.
They'll start coming out looking around for stuff. And I don't know if anyone's mentioned about times of day to go either, or tides or anything. So I've joined this conversation late.
Yeah, so we were saying about the time of day. They tend to be out a lot just before nighttime or just at the nighttime.
Yeah, late dusk. I think we've had a couple of good ones. The biggest ones we've had are generally laid up in the holes under kelp during the middle of the day, but around dusk time they'll come up and have a good wander around.
Yeah.
Yeah, missed all this.
So if you see the question of that, do you think that's there's a time season, or it's more certain tide and slack water? Would you say it's more the time of the season?
Now's the best time to get them really right through to the summer. I think Rowan will probably agree with me. If it's not good tide, they'll generally go into the holes and hunker down. If you've got a nice late evening incoming tide, it's probably the best tide to go, because the water will push in. The fish will start moving, lobsters will come out. Also, the light's going down as well. I think that's probably the best time to go for them.
I think the lobsters will, if it's daytime, they'll be in the same holes, whatever's going on with the tide. But yeah, you have to dive less deep if it's a low tide. Yeah, if it's like right at dusk, so like sunset to last light, if you can still see them, if there's enough light, then they will start coming out of their holes before it actually gets pitch black. So that can be quite a nice time if you're over really good ground. But yeah, it's they'll be in the holes whatever the tide state is. They'll still be in the same holes if it's daytime.
Yeah, we didn't actually say that, but if you're just starting out, I think I wish I'd known. I know it's super basic, but I wish I'd known. First of all, go at low tide, because if you think about, I don't know, if you got a spring tide, you've got an extra 5 meters, 6 meters of water on the holes. So it's going to make your life a lot easier.
Yeah.
And I would say put your spear gun away and just focus on lobstering. Personally, I would just make a little hook about 4 feet long with a little piece of metal, really, just to tease them out. I know Max sometimes says I need to just use my hands and man up, but I would say that would be my lobster starter pack.
I think a spear gun's pretty much as easy to carry around with you as a hook. Just
not if you have a Rob Allen, my friend.
No, I've got a shorter one.
Yeah.
When I actually find one, I don't use the spear gun as a whole. I take the spear out of the gun and just use a loose spear. Just find it a lot easier.
Okay.
That was the biggest learning point that I took away from going out with Mr. Mills. Was that if you're gonna go out and look for lobsters. Don't think about shooting fish, because your head's going to be in a completely different position.
Yeah.
So I've only been diving a few years, and I think I learned more in one session with going out with Chris and him telling me how to find a lobster than I had done in 3 years of trying to do it myself. And it was put the spear gun away, or don't use the spear gun to look for fish, and get your head in amongst the kelp as well. And that way you're actually looking in the right places. They were the two sort of big things as a learner, really, I suppose.
Yeah, I find the same thing happen when for flatties. It's just if you don't look for them, it's going to be very tricky unless you bump into them. But if you're targeting flatties and you want flatties, you need to put your head only and focusing only on that. Otherwise, if you do a bit of bass, a bit of pollock, and you're hoping to do flatties, it's not going to work.
Counts. Yeah. I would say it's like, if you really want to get into hunting lobsters, is you've really got to think like a lobster. You look at, it sounds a bit like Mr. Miyagi-ish, but you look at the ground, you think, if I was a lobster, where would I go? What's the coziest little hole or ledge that I can see, and just go and have a look underneath it. Pull the kelp out of the way, move the weed, stick your head underneath, get really, really close. And don't be afraid to stick your head in holes. There's nothing down there that's going to attack you, apart from the odd conger eel.
But they're pretty friendly unless you get your hand in there.
They're pretty friendly. It's really just getting down on the seabed and sticking your head in holes and having a look.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Chris has
and a
just
small
made-
torch as well.
Sorry, mate. Chris has just made me think as well. A really good way to getting into it would just be to do some low tide. You know, without even getting the suit on, just get down there at low tide, because you can pull them out. And yesterday when because it was a 30 centimeter tide, Chris making me chuckle there. What I actually did was, you guys think I'm mad, but I was lying down on the ground with my head on the floor, looking along to see where the because it was so bright, it was quite hard to see. I was looking along to see where the lobsters might be, and actually led me straight to a hole. So yeah, that's an amazing point. Think like a lobster.
Only a good tip for beginners. If you're looking for lobster holes on rough ground, you want to get your face as low to the bottom of the seabed as you can. It's so much easier to see the holes. If you're kind of cruising above, that is helpful. If you're just trying to stay near the surface, just looking for where the kind of ground that they'll be at, where there's like elevation, like where there's like a 2 meter drop, because that's a good way to find it. There will be lobsters, but when you're actually looking for the holes, you want your face like right near the seabed. It makes it so much easier to find where they'll be.
I find out as well to be upside down.
Yeah.
To get your head a bit more inside the holes and the caves, it really helps to see. And also your sight is getting used to the darkness. Because I'm not using torches, but so you can wait a bit longer, and your sight gets used to the darkness. If you're too far from the hole, you're getting too much light from the surface, and then your eyes you won't be able to see anything deep inside the cave. So if you can get your mask close to the cave and slowly your eyesight is getting used to the darkness.
Yeah, I'll just get under the overhang or under the rock. Just take 30-40 seconds just to really just chill out, get your eyes accustomed to the light levels, and then you'll start to pick out all the details you'd have missed if you just swum by.
Yeah, exactly.
There's another reason I like to use the spear gun when I go diving for lobsters, is that if it's very poor visibility, and you want to be able to find the hole again easily. So once you found it, you're going to be going up, down, up, down. When I find a hole with my spear gun, I take the spear out the spear gun, and then I can either wedge it into a rock or stab it near the hole, so that instead of looking around for the hole again when I go back down the second time, I can just go straight to it by following where the spear gun line goes to the spear. If you've got a buoy, I mean, you can just leave a weight there, but if you're on really shallow ground, you might not be actually towing your buoy around at the same time. So that's another pro of actually having a spear gun with you when you're hunting lobsters.
Okay, yeah.